Good afternoon. Due to some technical difficulties this morning, it was impossible to tape and live stream the service. So if you tried watching earlier, or if you are just back from the women's camp up north, this will only be the sermon. For several years, the Stewardship Committee has discussed having a special service highlighting the environment. However, the ideas just did not seem to gel. We've only gotten as far as putting a few bits and bobs in the newsletters. When Roberto asked for a service to cover his holiday absence, the climate issues of the summer, with droughts and fires in the west and floods in the east and in Europe, made it clear that it was perhaps time to tackle the subject. I've always felt competent to lecture about environmental issues, but wasn't sure how theologically sound my sermon might be. There really isn't much in the Bible about increases in carbon dioxide concentrations and global warming. The Bible is, however, teeming with references to water. And if you had a chance to glance at the readings, you'll notice that in the readings, the prayers, and the children's story, which you also missed, there are numerous references to water. We are all drawn to water. It often represents relaxation. Some are at the lake or the ocean if we're close enough, walks along the river, or simply sitting on a bench at the weir and watching life along the river. I find the water calming. The strong breath out upon hearing the loons on a northern lake, or that first bit of peace face down in the water with a snorkel. Ever since needing to memorize it in school, the one line, "He leadeth me beside the still waters," from Psalm 23, has been very soothing and reassuring. The Bible is full of references to water, starting with Genesis and the forming of land and water, Moses getting water out of a rock, the parting of the Red Sea, quenching a thirst through the Savior, cleansing through baptism, walking on water, and fishermen, and on and on. Genesis describes the separation of land masses from water, water teeming with life, and land also teeming with life. And God gave dominion over all of this to mankind. From Genesis and from the Psalm, we can see that God gave us all we could ever ask for: the mountains, the roaring seas, the water to provide people with grain, with bounty, with meadow for flocks. And all these things shout and sing together for joy. As Stuart Folster related in a service here at St. Andrews last summer, giving the power to mankind came with equal responsibility to maintain those true treasures, to use them wisely, and to pass them along. Making perhaps an odd reference to the parable of the talents in Matthew, where the master was upset with the servant that did not increase the value of the talents or the treasures entrusted to him, how would the master in that story have reacted to the mass destruction of those treasures? Life on earth depends upon water. We all know that. But do we stop to think about what we are doing to this treasure? There are large areas around the world where there have been historic shortages of water, and these are getting worse. We are also doing a good job of polluting what fresh water we do have. There was a documentary on TV a number of years ago. It included a segment on a family living on some remote mountainous area. I don't remember exactly where, but really, it could be anywhere. They had to walk miles over rough terrain to get water to carry back to their home. And there didn't even seem to be a village there. What struck me and stuck with me all this time was the husband saying, "We don't wash our whole face, just the eyes." This is how much they had to conserve water. This is extreme shortage. And as we more often think about instances where the problem is for clean water to drink, and not just villages in third world countries, where agencies such as PWS&D work to build wells, but also in parts of Canada, where clean drinking water and reserves can still be elusive. Now, there are water issues in places that have not had these problems before. The recent stories about the Colorado River come to mind. The South Saskatchewan River is down this year, with sandbars extending almost the full width of the river upstream from Saskatoon. The glaciers are melting more quickly than ever before. So far, there has been no water rationing, but other places do so under lesser circumstances. It makes one consider both what we should do and what we actually do with this precious resource. Have you ever thought about how much water goes into the items we use every day? I often see little notes about what it takes to produce different items of our food. To grow one almond requires over 4 liters of water. Oats generally require about 6 times less water than almonds to grow. And potatoes use a lot less than that. I make this comparison for those turning to non-dairy milk substitutes. And just this week, I saw a bit about a new potato milk becoming popular in some places. It makes us consider how we should view even our own food security and sustainability. And as a personal note, as a scientist, plant breeders are working to develop lines of important crops that make more efficient use of available water by identifying which genes are in play for selection. But I digress. We may hear more about water requirements for food protection, including beef, but have you ever thought about how much water goes into producing the clothing that we wear? Approximately 11,000 liters of water is used to make 1 pair of traditional cotton jeans, with the most water used to make the lighter colors of blue. There are ways to recycle this water, but cost and awful local willpower make this difficult, but it is possible. A simple t-shirt can consume 2,700 liters of water. It is estimated that in 2015, the fashion industry consumed 79 billion cubic meters of water. That's enough to fill 32 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. I think you get the picture. At the same time, the fashion industry is pushing fast fashion, the hot styles and colors for the year. This means that there are hot must-have items advertised, only to be replaced by new hot must-have items 6 weeks later. None of these items, according to my mother as a seamstress, would be considered constructed to last. Around 85% of all textiles are thrown away in the U.S., roughly 13 million tons in 2017. These are either dumped into landfill or burned. The average American has been estimated to throw away 37 kilograms of clothing every year. Personally, being frugal, I have very carefully worked to make sure that the dress pants I wear to work do not fall apart until I retire, and I refuse to buy anymore. COVID and working from home has ensured that I will not fall apart at the seams on my way out the door. But I think Al finds this unnerving, afraid that it will become an excuse to stay working just that little bit longer. The reading from James tells us that storing up wealth on earth is pointless and fleeting. It is a reminder that having all of the glittering treasures on earth isn't worth a thing if the planet is not sustained, if we leave it unsurvivable, and if our greed does injustice to our fellow travelers on this earth. Greed plays a role in what happens to our waterways. Large and small companies and individuals all want to get their share of our resources. If you think of colonialism, the European countries that roamed the earth were not there to save the poor savages, as they may have referred to the local indigenous populations that lived there, but rather to get their hands on the natural resources of the area. When I was a Saskatchewan rep to PWS&D, I met a partner from northern Guatemala. His projects involved food security with a focus on training and supporting women and children about vegetable gardening to support their families, both for food and for sale in the markets. However, one of his biggest problems was the poisoning of water supplies from a nearby gold mine, approved by the Guatemalan government, probably because of the money it brought in for them. There was increased illness, probably, and cancer caused by this, and it was most prevalent in the vulnerable, children and young mothers. To make matters worse, if the people protested against the gold mine, they were often likely to get shot, charged by the police, and imprisoned rather than being taken for any treatment. PWS&D is working with the partner Ahmed to teach the Mayamam, which is the indigenous Mayans in the area call themselves. Anyway, to teach the Mayamam men and women about their collective rights in order to protect their land from environmentally harmful mining operations. When the partner visited Canada for consultation, arrangements were made for him to visit Ottawa to speak to our government. We can feel smug about how things are done in Canada, but this was a Canadian mining company working in Guatemala. More locally, and I have noticed similar things recently, either because they are appearing in the news more often or because I've been focused on this service, but the news recently covered a series of stories about a company from Quebec wanting to harvest peat moss in northern Saskatchewan, north of La Ronge. On the surface, this doesn't sound very earth-shattering, but in order to do this, the company would have to drain this area of muskeg. Ecologically, this destruction of wetlands is devastating, as is the loss of any natural wetlands. Also, the layers of peat under the muskeg are a great carbon capture project worked on by nature for millennia. And the worst part is the impact on the local indigenous population, whose livelihoods in the bush and cultural herbal medicines are at risk. The company's plan is to restore the area in 80 years. Will our provincial government okay this, to reap tax dollars? As individuals, the differences we make cannot solve the whole issue. The powers that be, both in business and among world leaders, need to make some difficult choices. We do need awareness and to make sure we choose wisely when we have a voice in choosing those in power. The news is not all bad. Just this week, the EPA in the US indicated they would fight to block the development of a gold and copper mine along a salmon-spawning river in Alaska. And at the leaders' debate on Thursday, the Canadian candidates at least acknowledged that changing from an oil-based economy to a green economy is not the end of the world. I'm also buoyed in spirit by the younger generation, who will be more largely affected by climate change and associated water issues. They are becoming more and more vocal and demanding. A statement I found in my research and I wanted to use somewhere, so I'm using it here, is that for Christians, the stewardship mandate is non-negotiable. We are to care for the earth, and we're to view our management of it as an assignment for which we will someday have to give an account. So while as individuals we cannot solve the whole issue, the next time you fill up a tub of water for a soaking bath, think of the family washing only their eyes. When you water your pristine lawn, think of subsistence farmers praying for rain and carrying water from distances to try and grow enough to feed their own families. When you put an item of clothing worn 3 times into the charity bin or into the landfill, think of the textile worker who made the fabric or sewed the item and who also has to deal with the polluted water in their city because of the dyes. Stop and recognize that they're but for the grace of God. Amen.